We're going to continue on with our agenda. And I want to introduce everyone to Dennis Sykes, who is going to introduce Rick McFadden. Dennis?
Whenever I get around a lot of Marines, I sometimes get a little emotional. I just do. So I'll try to do this well. This was last minute. I was asked to do this, as Rick is a good friend of mine. So I'll get to do this. This is Rick's bio, and it probably doesn't cover everything because he has a little bit of humility about his life and experience, but I'll try to go through this. Rick McFadden is a native of South suburban Chicago. He enlisted in the Marine Reserves and went to Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego in August 1986. Then to the Infantry Training School for the MOS of 0351, Infantry Anti-Tank Assaultman. Shortly after being promoted to sergeant, he graduated college and accepted a commission as a second lieutenant in September of 1990. At the basic school, he was awarded Major General Merit Edison Marksmanship Trophy for being the highest rifle and pistol score in a class of 209 Marines. Permit me an aside, being an enlisted Marine myself, there were 209 going through OCS. He was number one. That's because he went through enlisted training to learn to shoot straight and well, so that when he competed against 209 fellow potential officers, he shined through. Just a little bias I have, pardon that.
You're forgiven.
Okay. Next, he went to the artillery officer course in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, after which he was assigned to 211 and then to 511 at Camp Pendleton, where he served as a forward observer, platoon commander, and liaison officer. The highlight of his active duty was being artillery liaison officer to Battalion Landing Team 11 and the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit. Under separation, upon separation, he was a captain. He's from a long military line. His maternal grandfather was in the Army at the Battle of the Bulge. His father-in-law was aboard a naval ship when injured by a kamikaze attack during the Battle of Okinawa. His father served in the United States Air Force, working on B-52s at Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base in Vietnam. And his brother was a Marine Public Affairs officer during the Operation Iraqi Freedom. After separating from the Marine Corps in September 1994, he married Cindy and headed to the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, to obtain a master's degree in business. He worked in sales and operations roles for 20 years in the private sector and started a handyman company in 2018. He left the corporate world to do that. And that's when I sort of met him. And he's a burgeoning businessman. He's starting business. He's doing successful business, and he's doing it well with the team he's put together. And he's actually done work that I'm familiar with, and he's pretty extraordinary. This is where I think he was pretty modest about how well he's putting together a company that's doing well. So he wouldn't say this, and he didn't ask me to say this, but if you need work done, his team can really do a good job with it. So I hope you don't take offense, Rick, that I said that, but yeah, he's doing a good job with his business. Rick and Cindy live in Castle Rock. They have a married daughter in college. Rick and Cindy are expecting their first grandchild in February, so please welcome Rick McFadden.
My friend Jim was going to give the bio, and he was exposed to COVID yesterday. He called me last night, so Dennis was put on the spot. So thank you for the bio. Normally what I say for my background is I was born short and bald, and not much has changed. So today we're going to discuss pirates, booty, not that kind of booty, Wes, a young United States of America, mercenaries, cannons, I love cannons, Marines, the founding of the Navy, early foreign diplomacy, and kicking the ass of radical Muslim extremists. Everybody in?
We're all radical.
So let's talk about the Barbary States. We're talking late 1700s, early 1800s. There are 4 countries that make up what we call the Barbary States. It's Morocco, Algiers, which is now Algeria, Tunis, which is now Tunisia, and Tripolitania, which we now call Libya. 3 of them, not Morocco, Morocco was independent, but 3 of those were part of the Ottoman Empire, part of modern-day Turkey. It was named for an Italian pirate named Barbarossa. Barbarossa lived 1483 to 1586. So what they call their kings, so in Algiers it's Dey, with a D like David, and then Tunis and Tripoli, they call them Bey, same spelling, just a D or a B, David or boy, Bey or Dey. We're going to talk a lot about these kings or presidents. So the history of the pirates, they really existed. It's not just in the movies, or when I was growing up, the like 1950s pirate movies on TV on Saturday afternoons. They were also known as corsairs, the Barbary corsairs or the Barbary pirates. We know that we get the name corsair, F4U, from these pirates. They were Muslim. They believed that the Quran required them to pillage and kill non-Muslims. So, you know, they were zealots. They started in 1710. And what they would do is they would capture merchant ships, steal the goods, enslave. They enslaved a lot of folks. We're going to talk about that. Right? Just like Afghanistan, kind of like in the news this week, right? Grady foresaw all this months ago when he set this up. It was just amazing, Grady. Coastal towns wouldn't be settled in the late 1700s or early 1800s because the pirates would just come ashore and grab folks. They took slaves from France, England, Ireland, Netherlands. They went as far, they did a raid on Iceland from the Barbary States to steal people. So what the deal was, the country's leader, the Bey or the Dey, would sponsor these pirates, and then the pirates could keep some of what they stole. The rest went back to the Bey or the Dey. The Dey would keep some, and then give the rest to the people to keep the people from revolting or killing him. Kind of like today, right? They take our taxes, and then they dole it out in special programs to keep themselves in office. This is a long tradition going back hundreds of years. Barbary enslavement. So they would take slaves, and they would be used to oar ships. They were known as galley slaves. They were used for ransom. A big economic driver for the Barbary States is they would take people and then demand ransom from families or towns. They used them for servitude, and they used them for harems. To the right is some of the famous sex slavery that they ran. I mean, these were bad dudes. Between 1530 and 1780, 1.25 million, 1.25 million Europeans were enslaved. Even for America, in this period that we're talking about, 700 Americans had been taken slave from ships they had captured, merchant ships. So this was a big deal. But one way slaves could regain their freedom is by converting to Islam. And there are some famous pirates that were enslaved, converted to Islam, and then went on to be famous pirate captains. This is just a crazy time in history. Meanwhile, across the pond, to get us oriented, 1776, we declare our independence. In 83, we signed the treaty. We're a free country. And immediately thereafter, the military was disbanded. We had just fought the military of a tyrannical government. Us as a new country, the U.S., we wanted no part of a standing military. So we disbanded the military. Well, when we were still under Britain's rule, England protected us from the Barbary Pirates. They had treaties with them. So now that we won, Britain is like, you're on your own. So they were eating our lunch. And why that mattered was trade. We didn't have semis back then, right? We're 13, we'll be 15 states but before this talk is over. Didn't have semis, trains, everything was via ship. So we would send our goods, tobacco, lumber, we'd send our goods overseas, we'd sell it there. They would load up their ships with our stuff and send it back to us. So this economic trade was a big deal. So at this time, this is a big driver to our economy. We don't have a military. We're a brand new country. We're sorting a lot of stuff out. We got our Constitution in '89. We're figuring things out. Washington and Adams choose to pay, just to pay the Barbary States tribute to leave us alone. 20% of our national budget was paid as tribute in this little bitty, brand new country that just, they have to pay for this Revolutionary War. They're sending 20% of the national budget overseas. So 1786, John Adams is the minister to England. Thomas Jefferson is the minister to France. They talk, they're still buddies back then. We know later they're gonna have a big falling out, but they're still buddies. Jefferson goes over to London to meet with Adams to talk specifically about the Barbary Pirates. Adams, he didn't want to fight. He's like, we're too young. We have bigger issues than to fight a foreign war. I say tribute. Jefferson's like, I say fight. Jefferson goes back, and not that they were making official decisions. They were like consulting with one another. A few weeks later, Adams calls on the Tripolitan ambassador to London, and he says, hey, let's figure out some peace here. And the guy says, absolutely not. And Adams says, why would you make war with a country that has done you no harm? And the guy said, because the Quran requires me to. You're not Muslim, so I am required to do damage to you. In 1797, Adams becomes president, continues to pay tribute. So his first term in office is coming to an end. Jefferson runs against him. And guess one of the platforms Jefferson runs on is millions for defense, but not 1 cent for tribute. Adams gets shellacked, Jefferson gets in office. Tripoli says, you not only need to pay us tribute, but you need to pay us more. Jefferson said, never mind. Tripoli declares war. So this is 1801. And again, just to keep in perspective, 1803 is Lewis and Clark, right? So this is a long time ago. This is before Don Whipple's time. Long time ago. All right.
That was a long time ago.
So let's talk about founding of the Navy. So again, there was a bitter division between, do we have a standing military or not? Some felt that there was an economic necessity, we needed to protect our assets. Some said, absolutely not. We just came out of a tyrannical government. Then in March of '94, the division is broken because of the Algerian pirates. Stuff was going on. We're constantly getting bad news from the Mediterranean. Our ships are being taken, slaves are being taken of American citizens. So in '94, everybody comes together and the Naval Armament Act is signed. But it has a condition. if we could secure peace with Algiers, the act would go away. So that the act did was it allowed to stand up a navy, and it allowed finances to build 6 ships. But isn't that funny? That was like the compromise. All right, we'll stand up a navy, but if we get peace, we're going to shut it down. Well, peace never came, still hasn't come. We still have our navy. All right, time out. What is the oldest U.S. military branch?
United States Marine Corps. 1775.
It was the Revenue Cutter Service. So I don't think I heard that from anybody. So they were founded in 1790 because to pay for the revolution, we put significant tariffs. Remember, transportation was the ships. And so with tariffs becomes a mature smuggling economy, right? So the government in 1790 stands up the Revenue Cutter Service, which we now know as the United States Coast Guard. Founding of the Marine Corps. So along with the Navy, there was an act, it was called an Act for Establishing and Organizing a Marine Corps, signed July 11th, 1798. Now we had Continental Navy, Continental Army, Continental Marine Corps, but the U.S. Navy, the U.S. Marine Corps, is signed into law in 1798. So it decreed that there would be 1 major, 4 captains, 24 lieutenants, that's scary, 48 sergeants, 48 corporals, can't forget the drum and fife guys, gotta have 32 drum and fife guys, and 2,720 privates. The mission, as stated in the Act, was to act on naval ships and shall at any time be liable to do duty in the forts and garrisons of the United States and any other duty on shore. This act would govern the Marine Corps until the National Security Act of 1947. So the fellows that did World War II, you were still operating under the act signed in 1798. Isn't that fascinating?
Wow.
So think about our balls, our birthday celebrations. We have Lejeune's letter, right? His order. So Major General Lejeune publishes Marine Corps Order number 47. We hear about that every year, dated 1 November 1921. And he says, on November 10th, 1775, a Corps of Marines was created by resolution of the Continental Congress. And then the order is for Marines to gather on that day every year. I've often wondered, why would you open it up? Like, nobody would say, you know, by this order, Rick's birthday is December 11th. I mean, it just is. Well, back then, there was we have our November 10th, 1775 birthday, but then we were reborn on July 11th, 1798. Isn't that fascinating? A little bit more trivia. So the original buttons didn't have the eagle, globe, and anchor. It had the eagle and a fouled anchor, and it has 13 6-pointed stars. We never see six-pointed stars. I had never noticed that. Is it the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation? Is that the one that they use this emblem? Or Historical Foundation? One of the organizations uses this. We don't get our modern emblem until 1868. All right, so we're still setting the table. We'll get back to our story here. So our first ships, it took 3 years after that naval act for us to actually launch our ships. So our first ships were the Constitution, Chesapeake, Constellation, President, United States, and Congress. Here I'm pictured with my Oscar County school buddy, Mike Martin. He was in the rack next to me. Martin, McFadden, alphabetical. We're at the USS Constitution. This naval ship is one of our first naval ships. It plays a big role in the Barbary Wars. It is still in service today, still manned by U.S. sailors. Isn't that fascinating? Only about 10 to 15% is original, but it is still in service. So Mike accepted his commission a couple weeks before I did, so I flew out to Boston to be there. There is a naval tradition. Many of us officers know about it. The first salute an officer in the Navy or Marine Corps receives, they give that enlisted man a quarter.
Silver dollar.
It wasn't that long ago. A silver dollar. I had the privilege of giving Mike his first salute. He's currently a Major General and was just recently the Commanding General for 4th Marine Division. Was it because of my salute? I think so.
Still got the dollar.
Oh, all right, you brought it up. So when he got promoted to General, I was invited to go out there. I couldn't make it, so what we did is, I still had it. You know, what's the chances of still having it? So I wrote a letter to his son, who had just gotten out of the Marine Corps, and a peer of ours that was in the Marines with us was able to present my letter to his son and the silver dollar. So that was kind of a neat circle of events. Early American naval ships. So the big ones, you know, that we see in the pirate movies, they were known as ship of the line. They had 74 guns, 196 feet long. We wouldn't get our first one in America until 1814. Our first ships were frigates, 44 guns, 175 feet. Then we had sloops, schooners, and gunboats. You know, they keep getting smaller. We'll have a lot of gunboat battles in the Med during the Barbary Wars. Just to put it in perspective, a modern day frigate is like 500 feet long, you know, and back then they were 175 feet. All right, so back to our story. This is where we need music playing or something. Bum, bum, bum. Patience wears thin. Thomas Jefferson writes to Secretary of State James Madison in 1801, and think about things going on this week. I know that nothing will stop the eternal increase of demand from these pirates but the presence of an armed force. So prelude, there's a Commodore Bainbridge. He gets sent by the United States as part of the U.S. Navy to Algiers to present tribute. You know, and the idea with tribute is, we'll pay you money, you leave our ships alone. Bainbridge sails into the harbor. He's escorted into a place to tie up. He sees the bay, presents the tribute, and you know, requests for peace. And the bay says, not only will there not be peace, but your ship is going to take my tribute to Constantinople for me. Bainbridge said, absolutely not. And the bay said, oh yeah? You are parked under my guns in my harbor. Bainbridge didn't realize that when they escorted him in, they put him right in the firing line. Algeria loads up our U.S. naval ship, the USS George Washington, with animals and merchandise to take to Turkey, to Constantinople. They lowered the American flag, raised the Algerian flag. It was completely humiliating for the Americans, for Bainbridge. The ship log reports that even tears fell in humiliation. So that happens in 1801 to Bainbridge. We're going to hear him again. He's got a funny story, not a funny story, but a life of ups and downs. So word gets back about that. Jefferson sends more ships. He sends 3 frigates and a schooner to help protect our ships. And he says, I want a blockade. So we're trying to do a blockade. There's many skirmishes that go on during this time between our ships and the pirate ships. On one skirmish against the USS Enterprise, you'll see that ships will have the same name throughout history. The Navy uses the same names. So the USS Enterprise was attacked by pirates, and Marine Lieutenant Enoch Lane and his detachment of Marines was able to fend them off with their musketry, because that was our early job, right? We get up in the mast and we shoot. So 1802, Congress finally officially authorizes military action. We're a new country. We're into our 3rd president. We weren't quite sure how to go to war. Jefferson was very patient about waiting for Congress to authorize it. They did in 1802. We now jump forward to May 21st, 1803. Bainbridge again, our USS George Washington fella. He's on a blockade mission in front of Tripoli, and he runs aground. He's stuck, and he's within cannon fire. So they're throwing anchors off, gear off, they're trying to get off. They can't, they're stuck. Bainbridge surrenders, and his whole ship is taken over, and all the sailors get enslaved, they get imprisoned. More bad news for Jefferson. It's just like every month the ship comes back with more bad news. So let's talk about some characters. So there's a fellow named Stephen Decatur. Before the Barbary Wars, he helped build ships. In February of 1804, he's tasked to lead 74 Marines and sailors to either get the Philadelphia back or destroy it. So what they do, we're going to talk more at the end about books. This is such a fascinating story. They disguise their naval ship to look like a merchant ship. They take down the American colors. They had a translator on the boat, on the ship, that could speak the dialects. And at night, they come up to the Philadelphia, which is manned by Tripoli pirates. And the pirates say, "Get away from our ship." And the interpreter says, "We've lost our anchors at sea. We're adrift. We're hoping to just come up alongside of you and tie up." Meanwhile, the sailors and Marines are underneath the decks. And on the command, they rush the Philadelphia, take it over. No Americans are killed. It was a fast little skirmish. We try to sail the Philadelphia out, but it won't sail, so we set it ablaze. So that's Stephen Decatur. He would later be given command of the USS Constitution, what we saw in Boston Harbor, and his brother will die next to him during the First Barbary War in one of the gunboat battles. Next fella, William Eaton. He was a captain in the Continental Army, so an Army guy. So we're covering our bases today, fellas. We got Army, Marine Corps, and Air Force. No Air Force, Navy. From 1797 to 1803, he was the United States Consul to Algiers. He was considered outspoken, brash, irritating, impetuous, a hard-headed New Englander, and some even thought he was a madman. So some of these characters, as you get to know them, I wonder if the Barbary States was a bad duty station, because they're a little rough, the fellas we sent over to the Barbary States. He lobbies the U.S. government hard. We got to get on land. Let's take care of this by force. We all know we don't own land until we got boots on the ground. Eaton felt that way. So finally, Jefferson commissions him as a lieutenant in the Navy and says, "Go do your thing." So his thing, the Navy sails him into Alexandria. Why Egypt? Why Alexandria? So the king, the day of Tripoli, when his dad dies, he kills his one brother in front of his mother, a gun, like they had guns back. Well, they might have had guns, whatever. He kills his brother in front of his mother, and then the other brother heads for the hills. He takes off. He ends up in Egypt in hiding, and about 100 guys go with him and support him. So Eaton's job was to find Hammett, the brother who escaped, find Hammett and convince him to join us to do an attack on Tripoli. Okay? He has to look and look, because this guy's in deep hiding. This is like witness protection stuff, right? Because the day of Tripoli wants to kill him. Eaton finds him and negotiates that we would give him money, we would put him in as day, and his family was held in prison, his wife and kids, by his brother the day that we would release them. Hammett was not a courageous man. He was very reluctant. He finally agrees. So it's Eaton, Lieutenant Presley O'Bannon, Wright, the hero from Tripoli, Marine Lieutenant Presley O'Bannon, 7 Marines, 2 midshipmen, Eaton, was some considered a madman, Hammett, who's not a very courageous fella from Tripoli. They assemble a mercenary team of 500 Greeks and Egyptians. Can you imagine this traveling circus? They march 600 miles through the desert. There are mutinies along the way. They're undisciplined military troops. They're not even military troops, right? It's like, what are you doing today? Not much. You want to go attack Derne? Where do they find 500 guys? Several mutinies along the way. As they get close to where the city they're going to attack in Tripoli is Derne. As they get close, the ships were supposed to meet them in the Gulf of Bamba. They get there, and there was no ships. And now they're all going crazy. So that night, Eaton makes a big bonfire to signal the ships. And fortunately for everyone, the next morning, the ships arrived. So what happens? The Battle of Derne. So Eaton sends, I turned 2 pages, excuse me. Eaton sends the governor of Derne. Again, Derne is a city in Tripoli, modern day Libya. Eaton sends a surrender demand to the governor, and the response he gets is, "My head or yours." That's what the governor said. So game on. So we were severely outnumbered. They had a fort, they had cannons, we had 1 cannon. We did have our ships off the shore, so it's our first joint task force. We had about 130 cannons offshore, so the Navy's pounding the fort, we're starting to attack, things are getting hairy, the battle could go either way. So Eaton and O'Bannon call for a bayonet charge. We overtake the fort. The Tripolitans manning the fort, leave the fort so fast, they leave their cannons loaded, so we just spun it around on them and shot it at them. We'll raise the U.S. flag for the first time on foreign shores. As a result of the battle only lasts like 2 or 3 hours. So all this time we've been paying tribute and kind of tiptoeing around these folks. We get into this battle and we turn it very quickly. 1 Marine is injured, 1 Marine is killed, 2 are injured. Eaton is wounded in his left wrist. Yusuf, the brother of the day who was in power, he organizes a couple of counterattacks, which fail. But by early afternoon, mid-afternoon, about 3:30 in the afternoon, our 15-star U.S. flag is raised over the fort at Derne. Huge victory. But don't a lot of our stories, our Afghanistan story right now, there's the but. So we had a consul general over there named Tobias Lear. His job was to negotiate peace with the Barbary States. So while Eaton is setting up defenses and organizing things and trying to encourage Hammett to take charge, Lear negotiates peace with the outgoing Day, Yusuf. And what he negotiates is, we won. Eaton wants to go on to the next big city, which is Tripoli. We've won the battle, we've got him on the run. Lear negotiates that we would pay Tripoli $60,000, which is 1.25 million in our current dollars. We would leave him in power. We convinced Hammett to play with us because we were going to put Hammett in place, and Yusuf could keep Hammett's family. Anybody else here win the battles and then have the diplomats negotiate away the treaty? It's a long American tradition. Yeah. Vietnam, Afghanistan. But for the first time, the U.S. flag is planted in the Western Hemisphere. We captured foreign territory, and we tested our supply lines. This was a big deal. We just got a Navy. like less than 10 years prior. So that was a big deal. So, when I talk, I always like the epilogues. I'm always curious what happens after the event. So I guess just to conclude the First Barbary War, that's what we did. We monkeyed and monkeyed with the Barbary States for years. Finally, Eaton goes ashore, we take the fort, win the battle. All right, so epilogue. William Eaton, he returns a hero. The Barbary States was a big deal. We formed the U.S. Navy because the Barbary States were so annoying. So this was a big deal. He was a big hero. But he was so embittered by the agreement. The U.S. government still owed him money because he fronted a lot of the money for stuff he did overseas. He'll be elected to the Massachusetts state legislature. He'll lose his re-election, starts drinking heavily, and he dies in 1811, just 6 years after his heroic efforts. He is one of the most prominent unknown American leaders there is. He did amazing stuff in his time, and none of us know his name until today. Stephen Decatur. He'll command several ships. He was a hero with the USS Philadelphia in the First Barbary War. He's a hero in the War of 1812. We're going to talk about him a little bit more here in a moment with the Second Barbary War, because there is a sequel to this movie. One isn't enough. He'll serve on the Board of Navy Commissioners. He gives a famous American military toast. The toast is, "Our country, in her intercourse with foreign nations, may she always be in the right and always successful, right or wrong." So that was Stephen Decatur. He will serve on the court-martial board for Commodore Barron. Barron was charged with unpreparedness. But like what we see a lot of times in these early years, so Barron is court-martialed, but then in 1839 he's the Navy's most senior officer. Isn't that crazy? Now if you get a blip on your record as an officer, senior enlisted guy, your career is dinged up. These guys are all dinged up and they're going to the highest levels. So Stephen Decatur, the big hero, he's killed in a duel in 1820. So after his big show in 1805, he's killed in a duel by that Commodore Barron, the one that Decatur sat on the court-martial board. Decatur is such a big hero in the early 1800s. We have 46 U.S. communities named Decatur, and it's for Stephen Decatur. Growing up, we would go to Decatur, Michigan. That was a special place for us. I had no idea that it was because of Stephen Decatur. Bainbridge, the fellow that has to take tribute on the USS George Washington. He's the guy that loses the Philadelphia. He serves as a second to the duel that Decatur gets killed in 1820. He'll serve on the Board of Naval Commissioners, and we have a lot of ships over the years, U.S. ships, that were named the Bainbridge. Tobias Lear, he was a diplomat that it just seems like he gave it away. And I tried so hard. I always feel like people act rationally in their own mind. Like, why would he give that treaty the way he did? I can't find anything that justifies his actions. But let me tell you about Lear. He's George Washington's personal secretary from 1784 until George Washington's death in 1799. When George Washington passes, Lear is at the bedside. Lear's the one that records Washington's last words. As Washington's personal secretary, one of his duties was to collect rent that was owed to Washington for different properties he had. And Lear was caught stealing some of the rent. He would hold on to it. Washington forgave him for that. After Washington lied, he doesn't give up Washington's diaries for a year. And when he does, there are sections missing and there are letters missing. And historians believe that Jefferson was critical of Washington's presidency during the summer of 1796, and it is believed that Lear destroyed those documents. Kind of a I got to tell you a little bit more. It's just fascinating. So he's married 3 times. The second, two wives died. The second time he marries Washington's nephew's widow. The third time to Martha Washington's niece. So if you were making a movie on this stuff, I mean, it was like, come on. Rough past, you know, some shady dealings working for Washington. Shady treaty. I mean, that whole treaty was kind of funny. So in 1812, he becomes the chief accountant to the War Department. Isn't that amazing? 1816, so the First Barbary War ends in 05. In 16, he commits suicide. But for the guy that had copious notes on everything, he dies without a suicide note or a will. One of U.S. history's great mysteries. O'Bannon. Especially for Marines, we all know O'Bannon, or for officers, right? We all know O'Bannon. Hammett is so impressed with his courage, he gives him a Mameluke sword as a sign of respect. He was a lively violin player. He even had the violin on that desert march, which, you know, we're always trying to empty our packs, right, to have light packs. This dude brought a violin, but he probably had a camel or something, right? I mean, he wasn't just carrying it. During one of the mutinies, O'Bannon and his Marines stood firm as the approaching mob came, and the mob backed off. He'll separate from the Marines in 07. He's elected to the Kentucky House and Senate. He dies at age 74. There is a building at the basic school, so officer boot camp is officer candidate school. We accept our commission, and all Marine officers go to the basic school in Quantico, Virginia. There's a building called O'Bannon Hall, we all know. It is now new. It's new, it's big, it's pretty. It was rather dated when I was there.
It looked like a cell block when I was there.
It looked like a cell block. It was 1960s, cinder block. The Barbary Pirates, so we defeat them. This is still the epilogue. But then we get into War of 1812 with England, so we're tied up, so the shenanigans start again. They just go right back to their nonsense. So with so then what happens is we send Stephen Douglas as Commodore back to the Barbary States with our naval ships. He rolls up on Algeria. They roll right away. Not a shot is fired. They sign a treaty. There's no more European major wars in the coming years in the 1800s. So the radical Islamic terrorists are kept in check. And then France colonizes Algiers and Tunis in 1830 and 1881, respectively. The Mameluke sword. Here it's pictured with Napoleon, supposedly in 1863. Commandant Archibald Henderson. Who's Archibald Henderson?
First Commandant?
No. Oh, wow.
Henderson Hall.
Grand old man of the Marine Corps, Archibald Henderson. Henderson would serve 52 years in the Marine Corps, 39 as Commandant. He would serve until his death. Archibald Henderson makes the Mameluke sword the official sword, not official, the sword to be worn by Marine officers in 1825. It's a sword we still wear today. There was a gap between 1859 and 75 where we all carried the Army sword. But I have the Mameluke sword here. If anybody wants to see it? It's beautiful, and it was prestigious back then, and it's prestigious today. Somebody asked me if I was going to sing the Marines hymn. Keep it up, and I might.
Wes will.
Yeah. So legend says that somebody that fought, a Marine that fought in the Mexican-American War is the one that wrote it. the reason I'm sharing this, all this is around the Barbary Wars, our battle with Derne. It's the official military song, it's the oldest official military song in our services. The lyrics date back to the 19th century. The music is from an 1859 opera. It's copyrighted. It was copyrighted in 1919. And it was officially adopted by Lejeune in 1929. Some of you may have known that. I don't think anybody's going to know this one. Maybe some of the fellas will. In 1942, one of the lines changed. It used to be on the land as on the sea, but in 42 it was changed to in the air, on land and sea. Aren't you glad you got up today? Where are they now? O'Bannon's Mamluk sword is lost to history. Isn't that a shame? The grandkids probably took it down to the thrift store. It was the Mamluk sword, and it's gone. But one of the midshipmen brought back this Mamluk sword. This is at the U.S. Naval Academy Museum. Next time you go to the Museum of the Marine Corps, O'Bannon's dirk is there. That's what he carried on the Desert March and the battle. And where are they now? Our little Devil Pup Joint Task Force today is a Marine Expeditionary Unit. And we ride on LSTs. Marine Expeditionary Force today carries about 2,200 Marines, combat Marines. It's set up to be able to go ashore for 30 days. It has a tilt rotor squadron. It's the world's 911. So we've come a long ways from old Bainbridge and Decatur and those fellas. Further reading, there's some really fun books, and this is such important history. We're fighting terrorists today, just as we did from the very start, from the moment we broke away from Britain. We've been fighting these radical Islamic terrorists ever since. Fascinating reading. Kilmeade from Fox's Morning Show wrote kind of an easy read, fun read. That is called Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates. That's a fun read. A little deeper read is The Pirate Coast, and that's subtitled Thomas Jefferson, the First Marines, and the Secret Mission of 1805. So those are some fun books. I'll have my sword here if you want to take a look at it. Any questions?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment as to, I did not know that O'Bannon had carried a violin with him. We had a saying in Vietnam, if you can't drink it, eat it, or shoot it, don't bring it.
Right. Right, isn't that something?
How much has changed in 1492? Columbus sailed the ocean blue. We were taught in school looking for a trade route to the east. Well, one of his missions was to try and get the eastern countries to attack the Muslims from the east and coordinate with the Europeans from the north and some armies from the west. We never were taught that in school, but that's one of the reasons he was sent west to look for that trade route that we were taught about. You can find some of it in a book called The Sword and the Scimitar.
Scepter, sword and the scepter?
Scimitar.
Thank you.
It was by that guy that was supposed to teach at one of the military academies at the last minute last year or the year before. They canceled him because he was considered not in tune with what we're teaching about Muslims from the early days, starting with the 7th century.